The Inner Sanctum presents the Wednesday Whip Around.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel. Today, we're presenting you another edition of the Wednesday Whip Around, and I have two very special guests with me. They are pristine Inner Sanctum specialists, and you will have seen them right across all social medias and throughout many of articles. I now welcome Stephen Paletti to the stage. Stephen, mate, good to have you on board again.
Yeah, it's great to be back again. I absolutely love doing this, and a little bit of a late fill-in off the bench, and I'm sure we'll get to late fill-ins a little bit later in the discourse here. I might just be wearing the right jersey for it.
I love that, mate. It's good to have you back, and John Baruch, mate, welcome aboard.
It's great to be back, and great to see you again, Stephen. I feel like we've got the original crew from the Whip Around back together, but I'm up and about. It's great to be here. Plenty going on in the world of stuff, and I'm keen to whip through it. We
are actually the original trio that started off the Whip Around all those weeks ago. So it's kind of fitting that we are called the Whip Around because we've come full circle. It's good to be back. We've had a massive week of sport. In particular, it has been the AFL that's been dominating the headlines throughout the weekend. Round one just kicked off. And John, I'll start with you, mate. What do you think of round one overall, first of all? And how do you see it panning out for the rest of the season?
I thought it was fantastic. I thought the AFL set it out really, really well. Living down here in Melbourne, the city was really a buzz. Everyone was really looking forward to it. The 5 games in Melbourne, 4 of them at the MCG. So everyone was really keen and clattering to get back. They didn't quite break that crowd record that they were looking for, but they still managed to get plenty of people through the gates, and there's a real thirst to get back to live sport and get back to the thing that everyone loves to do. And I know myself heading to the MCG on a Thursday night, 72,000 people in the ground. It was an amazing feeling, and it was just amazing to be back sitting around the same people that you usually sit around. No more of this COVID sit where you get told to sit in on your allocated seat. So it was nice to be back. Some of the rhythms of Melbourne were back, and definitely turned it on. And the football was great too. Really good spectacle across most of the games, and it was really good. Really, 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 really good start to the year.
Yeah, I thought so too. It actually did feel like by the end of it was a bit long starting on Wednesday and getting to Sunday, but I think that was able to allow all the fans, both at the games and also at home watching from interstate, to soak it all in and enjoy 5 days of some fantastic football. I wouldn't say it's the footy set the world on fire. I reckon a couple of games that really stood out was Adelaide and Fremantle. That was a crazy game to watch. The Port Brisbane game up at the Gabba was a two-way affair essentially in the end. And to kick it off, Carlton setting the tone for the rest of the competition to knock off a Richmond fan base that probably still think they're premiers. So it's been a fantastic 5 days. Stephen, what did you think of it all? Was it weird that it started on Wednesday night and ended up finishing with West Coast and Gold Coast on Sunday?
Yeah, I thought that the Wednesday start was a little bit weird. Like we've seen in recent years, the AFL, it's been Carlton, Richmond, kick off the season, Thursday night footy, let's go. That tells you that the AFL men's competition is back. And then this year, it was just a random Wednesday night in March. Granted, it was last season's grand finalists. I'm not going to use the phrase grand final rematch because that's not what the game was, and anyone who tells you that's what the game was is a moron. That game in itself paled in significance to what happened afterwards, and that's been touched on today, so we're not going to touch that here. But I don't know. I guess it just felt weird starting on a Wednesday. Like we all know the TV deal goes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that's the AFL men's and the NRL men's competition. We know that's what it is, and I can understand wanting to try and start the season with a bang, but for me, it just fell flat and had all that extracurricular stuff not happened. To be honest, I think we'd have all forgotten about it by now that the season started on Wednesday.
I like what they did in terms of spacing the games out. So usually you have a couple of Saturday games overlapping and a couple of the Sunday games overlapping. So I like what they did as a real bang return to men's football, no games overlapping. Every single game's got clean air and you can run it in like that. But it did feel like a little bit of a drag, 7:10 on a Wednesday night to start the year. It doesn't really have the same sound to as about 7:20 on the middle Thursday night in March to really start the season. And I fair enough, if you want to start the season with the grand final rematch, all power to you by all means. I'm not actually fussed, even though my team's been opening the season for the last 10 years. But just get it in a time slot which semi makes it feel right and just makes it a little bit more accessible for people. And like midweek, Wednesday night, school night, that's probably why that crowd was a little bit down, even though it was such a grand occasion for Melbourne. Just something that I don't know. The Wednesday night fell a little bit flat.
I agree. I think the one thing that stood out for me, and I know round one, Wednesday night, we had the build-up of 6 months of not having football, but the week almost didn't have a proper build-up. Like we went straight in from the community series. Here in South Australia, we had the long weekend, and then bang, you're into Wednesday night football for round one. And for me, you always have that build-up to Thursday night, Carlton, Richmond. A lot of the local footy teams and state teams are training on Thursday, then they gather around at the pub or the footy club, and they're going to watch the first bounce. Like it felt a bit different being on a Wednesday night. I can sense the flatness. The Wednesday night also being a school night, as you said. And I think overall, if you wanted to have the grand final rematch, I think build it up. I love Carlton Richmond. I'm a traditionalist, so I'm going to have Carlton Richmond starting the season Thursday night. Recently the results have sort of gone the same way, but to have Carlton now almost reignite that rivalry on that Thursday night round one tells me that can be the staple game to kick off the year. And then you move into Friday night, which can be the grand final rematch. Friday night football, the grandest of stages. To have these two teams going at it again after a grand final would be such a better spectacle. Carlton St Kilda was a good game of football, scrappy game. Didn't like the skills too much, and I thought the umpiring was a bit but it's not a game I'm wanting Friday night to kick off the year. I'm wanting that grand final rematch. I'm wanting these big teams playing in these time slots. That gets your crowds going. That gets the atmosphere on social media and at home building. And I think to have that aspect, I think the AFL got it wrong. But overall, as a round perspective, you can't complain too much about the fixture because football was amazing. And the only game that didn't really turn up to what I thought it was going to be was Geelong and Essendon. So I think overall, for around 7 out of 10, what would you think, Jono?
I have to agree, around 7.5 out of 10. It was fantastic. There were, as you said, there were a couple of games that really fell flat, but overall, fantastic start to the year.
Stephen, your thoughts on the round out of 10?
I mean, 6.5, 7. Like it seems like it's par for the course. Like it wasn't, to use a bad pun here, it wasn't kick a major sort of levels of stuff, but it wasn't like. But it didn't fall flat either. It was sort of like middle of the park, kind of where you expected it to be honest.
And Jono, the fallout from round one has been quite extreme, and we're not going to touch on certain things because it's been a week really since the Wednesday night fiasco. But tribunal and certain decisions and game results and stuff like that. I'll pose this question first of all: what surprised you the most from round one?
I think more so the style of play, and we sort of the league's been a bit of a copycat league in the sense that everyone sort of follows the champions and the reigning premiers, and I think everyone's sort of taken the lead out of what Melbourne did so brilliantly in that grand final, and there's a lot of focus on winning the centre breaks and scoring quickly out of it. And I think you noticed with most of the games this week is that there was a massive emphasis on winning the ball out of the centre of the ground. And if you won the centre clearance, you more often than not, you scored from that. It happened in most of the games where there were run-ons and momentum swings and just teams scoring quickly. So I think that was probably the biggest thing. It wouldn't be a footy season without the MRO and tribunal furore about different decisions and whether talking about the spirit of the game and whether or not the AFL's got it wrong and do they really care about protecting their heads. A couple of decisions that originally went one way have been overturned the other way, and it's prompting a lot of debate again, and you're gonna have this circus the whole time. I thought the AFL was right in the decisions that they did make at the match review table in suspending Willie Rioli and sending Mitch Robinson in for a suspension. Willie Rioli got off, which was remarkable. Amazing that it wasn't even given a free kick in the game. But it's one of these things that we're going to continue to discuss this year, and particularly with the ideas of concussion becoming more and more prevalent. It's just the AFL had the perfect opportunity to set a standard. I feel like they did. And the clubs are winning out by the system in finding loopholes to rot it and get their players off through the tribunal, which is well done. But if we're serious about protecting the head, then we can't be having these decisions overturned.
Is it, Stephen, is it something that the clubs more so now have to really pinpoint? I know they want their players playing, but if the AFL wanting to stamp these types of acts out and having these concussion protocols, the clubs have to follow concussion protocols and take care of their players. But if they're putting the players that are putting other players in danger, do you think that this whole fiasco should be stamped out by the clubs before even the AFL can get to it?
In theory, yes, but the reality is that the league needs to come down hard first. Like, clubs are going to exploit every single loophole that they have, every single opportunity they can take. You know, it's the difference between coaches keeping their job and losing their job. You know, if Willie Rioli, gets suspended, and that's the difference between a win and a loss this week. That comes back on the club maybe at the end of the season if they miss the finals by a game. It's the clubs are going to take every opportunity they can. It's really on the league to come down hard and stamp this out. As much as I would like to believe that clubs are going to do the honourable thing, I just don't think that, when there's hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars at stake, final spots, all this sort of stuff, if there's an advantage there, you take it, and you wouldn't be running a proper business. And I think that's something that we do forget, is that these clubs are businesses, and with COVID and everything, and the bottom line in relation to money, like a finals appearance means a hell of a lot more money. And so it's going to be on the league to stamp it out, and the league to take a backbone and say, look, this isn't right. You fix this or we'll fix it for you. And I think it will then come back to the league saying, all right, we're going to fix this, tough crap.
Yeah, I'm exactly on. I completely agree with you there. And speaking of players, we'll change the tune because the AFL had a very successful round one overall, and it's good to have footy back. And these discussion topics are going to be happening for the next 30 weeks until we reach the glorious day in September for the grand final. So keen to jump on board that train. But speaking of players, it was tough to select this week's whip around team. All right, I put the feelers out there, and you two both stood up to the plate. Who's stepping up to the plate for the Socceroos, Stephen? Because I don't think they're going to have anyone left.
Hang on, sorry, I've just 1 second. Hang on, sorry, Graham Arnold's giving me a call. I must be next in line. It's been an absolute shambles. Players are going down with COVID or as close contacts. Players are going down as injuries. Graham Arnold had his own COVID issues. It's just, you've got Alex Wilkinson coming out of retirement. I couldn't tell you the last time Alex Wilkinson played for the national team before today. It's just turned into an absolute shambles. But the only saving grace in all of this is that Japan is also having player issues. They've had, I believe it's 4 or 5 of their key players pull out of this game as well on Thursday night. So it's not all doom and gloom for the Socceroos, but how Graham Arnold selects this team and who actually lines up where is almost anyone's guess at this point. But I honestly couldn't tell you what's going to happen on Thursday night, and I don't think anyone is going to know what's going to happen on Thursday night until an hour before kickoff, when the lineups actually have to be in.
I understand it's a big night for the Socceroos. It's almost win or you don't qualify territory. There's the game this week, and then I think the following game against Saudi Arabia, it's win or go home, but particularly this one. And is like you mentioned Graham Arnold and the way he picks his team. The story that's broken yesterday around Melbourne City and Curtis Good and them not actually releasing him to play. But isn't that the point now for the A-League clubs who, if they have the talent, to be releasing their players and to be letting the younger generation and future Socceroos come in and take this opportunity rather than going back to an Alex Wilkinson or going back to a Matthew Sporanovic or someone who can come in and just fill the hole because we need someone with international experience?
I mean, yes, it definitely is, but at the same time, and there's been talk about all this, 50-player list that goes out to all the clubs of who might be included, who might not be included. Because of whatever reason, the A-Leagues once again are not doing international breaks, and we saw how much that impacted clubs during the A-League women's season with the Matildas call-ups and then the New Zealand teams call-ups. To the point where the Wellington Phoenix had one of their outfield players sitting as a reserve goalkeeper on the bench because they didn't have a backup goalkeeper once Lily Allfeld got called up to the New Zealand team. Like, I understand the point of City wanting to keep their player available because legally they can based on the guidelines. And then from a national team perspective, it's like, let him come up. But like City, as I was saying before with the AFL, the clubs have got to look after themselves. And the reality is City still have a ridiculous number of games to play in such a short time to finish their season because they have to go over to play in the Asian Champions League in their group stage, which is a hub, and that takes about 2.5 weeks to get those 6 games done. And so they really can't afford to have another postponed game. And this would have put the game into postponement territories because I believe City have 5 players caught up, and that's where that's where it is, like where you can request a postponement based on players unavailable due to national team call-ups. So it's really a delicate situation. As I said, I was saying off air to you guys, this whole situation has been utterly shambolic from start to finish. And who's actually going to play in the 11? I think the only player we can actually, put in permanent market is Matt Ryan in goals. Like, that's, other than that, I couldn't tell you who the starting 11 is going to be. And I don't think if anyone says they can tell you exactly who's going to be in that starting 11 on Thursday night, I'm calling them a liar, because there's no way of knowing, like, COVID, who goes up, who goes down, do we actually have enough players to fill the squad? Who knows? Like, it's utterly shambolic. But looking at the game itself, it's do or die in the sense of automatic qualification. You win here, you get those valuable 3 points. You go to Saudi Arabia next week, you get those 3 points. It puts Australia, I believe, 2 wins puts them in the position to automatically qualify because of the opponents. Otherwise, it's that third place playoff, and we barely made it a couple of 5 years ago now. When that happened, and who's to say that's going to happen again with this current lineup? I mean, it's the only saving grace is that these playoffs are going to take place in neutral venues and that they're one-offs instead of home and away legs. So it might keep that a little bit easier, but at the same time, I mean, it's getting tight, and Australia is still, unfortunately, very much at risk of not qualifying for the World Cup.
It does seem like, and I'll be honest, I didn't even know the Socceroos were playing Thursday night, and it seems to be that the current 11 didn't even know they were playing either because they've gone out and about and got COVID. But yeah, it's weird because Australia's been pretty much in every World Cup that I've known since 2006, and whilst it hasn't been greatest of runs besides that amazing 2006 campaign. If Australia don't make this World Cup, Jono, what does it say about the stocks of Australian football in general? Because we should have talent ready and waiting to be. It's almost like a contingency list for like the AFL has, with each club having top-up players. Like, shouldn't players be ready to come in and stand in their national country? And should it almost be like I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Compulsory. That's the one. Compulsory that players, if they're picked, they play regardless of what their club say.
I think Stephen's better equipped to answer this question than me because they follow the game a little bit closer than I do. But I think it definitely speaks to the current state of football in Australia. And there's been the much publicised problems with the A-League this year and the A-Leagues this year, I'm sorry, and everything that's happening over there with the broadcast and the player development and players moving overseas to go and hone their craft. And I think it's more of the fact, and you mentioned it just before, I've grown up in an era in my watching sport is thankfully, I haven't really seen a Socceroos team not in the World Cup ever since I started following sport properly, ever since that 2006, and obviously going through what happened last time to get to Russia 2018, which was a bit, got a bit hairy then. It sounds like it's going to be a bit hairy here. I think the players will definitely be needing to play, and of course, anyone who gets the opportunity or who does get presented with the opportunity to play for their country should absolutely take it with open arms. It's part of any young footballer's dream to go up and play club football and get that international cap. So I think that's there, and there's no shortage of players who want to play for Australia. It's whether or not they're good enough is the question. Does Australia have those systems in place? Who knows?
I can answer that question right there.
It's one of those things that I think will get found out in the next couple of weeks, and whether or not qualifying for this World Cup is the biggest wake-up call that Football Australia and Australian football needs to really get everything together and get their ducks in a row to make sure that they are producing those quality of players and making sure that wearing that beautiful gold Socceroos jersey that Stephen's wearing now means a hell of a lot more than what it is. And there's a coach there that can instill an Australian brand and style of play.
I guess then you have to look at, I guess you then have to look at what is the Australian style of football. And the reality is that no one knows because it's so out there. So I just want to go back to an earlier point for a second. Sorry, there's a second name you can actually put in pen to that lineup, and that's 34-year-old Bruno Fornaroli getting his first call up to the Socceroos. Naturalized Australian, born in Uruguay, as we all know, represented Uruguay at a junior level. So you can definitely put Bruno Fornaroli in. I mean, I would like to think that missing out on the World Cup would kickstart something in Australian football, but at the same time, the problems go a lot deeper than anything that we can get into here, given the time space that we have. Like, we could talk for 3 hours on the state of Australian football and its development and the future of Australian football, and we would still probably not get anywhere. I mean, it's just problem after problem after problem, and they're all kind of compounding right now at once. In the way that Australia is struggling to qualify for the World Cup again. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, everyone wants to see, like, I think most players want to play for the green and gold, and I don't think that, that's ever going to be questioned. It's just whether those systems are in place to make that happen. And right now, I don't think those systems are in place, and I don't know how you get them in place. And there's as many different paths that you can go on. It's how long's a piece of string kind of thing. I know last week Antonis put out a fantastic piece on the Inner Sanctum about Bruno Fornaroli's call up and how we got into this space, and I definitely recommend anyone going to go and read that, because it makes some good points about where Australian football is at. For now, I think the conversation, like, it's obviously too hard of a conversation to have right now. I think we just all need to be sending our well wishes to whatever lineup the Socceroos put out on Thursday night in Sydney, and whatever lineup they put out next week in Saudi Arabia, and just hope for 6 points and that it's automatic qualification and we don't have to go through the playoffs, because if Australia has to go through the playoffs, I genuinely think if I told me to put a number on it, I'd say 75% chance Australia does not make the World Cup by going through the playoffs.
Yeah, well, let's hope the Aussies do get the job done over the next couple of qualifiers, and we don't have to stress about this, and all the problems can be covered up with some more wallpaper going into hopefully another World Cup campaign. I tell you who does have a lot of problems at the moment is a fellow Aussie, Daniel Ricciardo. We just had round one of Formula One season kick off, and being an Italian, I was very happy to see Ferrari 1-2. But the focus here is Danny Rick. I think just quickly touching on him, McLaren have promised him a car to be right up there, challenging the Red Bull, the Mercedes, and now the Ferrari. He's finishing 14th in round one. I know they've had a lot of car issues, and just to put a bit of a backstory, they had a lot of brake issues coming into the second test, which was just last week, after being top of the table in the first test a couple of weeks ago. No one knows where McLaren is at the moment, and it's a bit of a concern considering he's finishing 14th when he was promised a good car for this year. He did have COVID as well coming into the season, about 10 days out. So for him to finish 14th in a car that needs a lot of improvement, but with the COVID pre-season as such coming into the race, I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts on Danny Rick, and can he see the light coming into this season? I know he moved to McLaren for a better opportunity, better chance at winning a championship as such, let alone a race. And now they haven't got that car. It's a bit like the Socceroos, actually. Problem after problem after problem, and can't seem to be getting anywhere. Is this going to hurt Daniel Ricciardo this year? I'll start with you, Jono.
I'm not sure. I'd like to put it down to he had his testing and qualifying interrupted because he had COVID, and then he had car issues, and because he couldn't get a clean runner, and the testing really set him back, and that really led to a low finish. But as he pointed to, it was a bad week for both the McLarens in Danny Rick and Lando coming in at 14 at 15. So McLaren certainly have issues, and for them to not deliver on their promises to have a car that matches up with Ferrari and Mercedes and Red Bull, who that you see from the race one, Ferrari went 1-2. They're going to be the teams to beat. Definitely excited to see the roadshow come out to Australia in a couple of weeks and get around it. I head down and past Albert Park regularly, and seeing the relayed surface on the track and the stands go up. So the buzz is certainly building. So I'm really, really hoping that Danny Rick can get some form in Abu Dhabi, I think the next race is. So there's a race before they come to Australia. So I'm hoping he does find some form and find his feet and can hopefully sneak a podium in Australia in his home Grand Prix. But not the best start for Daniel, but hopefully some better times on the horizon.
Yeah, Danny Rick, they've got a Saudi Arabian Grand Prix coming up this weekend. So then a week off before we head to Melbourne to the Australian Grand Prix, which hasn't been back in a couple of years. Stephen, we'll get your thoughts on Danny Rick, but as well, the Australian Grand Prix coming back after 2 years must be, regardless of where Danny Rick finishes, a pretty damn good result considering. I'll give you a bit of insight. This race was actually off the calendar for this year, and we had to fight tooth and nail to get it back. So how excited are you to see the Australian Grand Prix, and your thoughts on Daniel Ricciardo?
I'm very happy to see the Australian Grand Prix back. Like I understand exactly why it was taken off the calendar to start with. You know, it's all money, and when you've got, you know, countries in the Middle East throwing millions and potentially billions of dollars to get the races there, you've got the growing US market since the success of Drive to Survive. You know, I think it was 2 races they wanted in the United States this year. You know, that's just creating bumper money, and so I can understand why Australia was set to miss out, especially given the last couple of years. But I'm definitely glad to see it back. On Danny Ricciardo, I mean, I'd be fascinated to see whether these promises are written into his contract with McLaren or whether they're handshake promises. Because if they're written into his contract, then to me that sounds like breach of contract, and he'd be free to look elsewhere. But I mean, it's not the first time that we've seen Ricciardo have issues, either with his vehicles or with the teams he's at. And I believe he's bounced around 3 or 4 different teams now. Does that sound right?
Yeah, he's gone through the early days with HRT. Then he was Red Bull. Then he was Renault, and now he's McLaren.
So that's his 4th team in his career, and I understand that not all of those are his fault. I mean, I see 2 ways forward for Ricciardo, and one of those might be hoping that Lewis Hamilton decides to hang them up and Mercedes come calling for him. Or it might, and this is going to sound very un-Australian of me, and I'll probably be expecting some hate mail for this. We might just have to accept that Daniel Ricciardo is not as good as we think he is. Like, we've put him on such a pedestal because he's won. He's kind of Australia's first driver that's broken through into that mainstream where, like, you can walk down the street and you go, oh, hey, how about Danny Ricciardo? What do you think of him? And everyone knows exactly who you're talking about. And I think we just put him on that pedestal where he's not going to be able to live up to the hype unless he has that Lewis Hamilton level of success. And it seems like he's incapable of doing that right now, whether it could just be as simple as Hamilton retires, Mercedes come calling, and they stick Ricciardo straight into Hamilton's car, and there's immediate success. But if that doesn't happen, then I think we do have to look at the possibility that Ricciardo is just not that good.
Yeah, there's been a lot of those concerns throughout the last couple of years from him coming to Renault, to McLaren, and had a pretty good second half of the season with McLaren last year, getting that win at the Italian Grand Prix. But don't want to jump too far ahead. It's only round 1. So let's hope with 22 other races to come, McLaren find their feet, and you'll see Danny Ric and Lando Norris fighting at the top. But Stephen, Jono, I think that's it, boys. It's another Wednesday rip around. I think we've done a pretty damn good job this week. What are your thoughts?
There's been plenty going on. The men's football started in all the different codes. A-League Women Grand Final week, which is another massive game. I know you'll be there, Stephen, cheering on your beloved Sydney FC. It's gonna be another big week in sport and another big week on the whip around. Thanks for having me, Anne.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. I've absolutely enjoyed it. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm surprised we managed to keep this under half an hour, to be honest. It's a lot to talk about.
I mean, with the amount of tabs you've got open, Stephen, I'm assuring we'd have a long whip around to discuss.
I've only got 10 open this time around. I only got 10 open.
10?
Yeah, I've only got 10 open this time around.
Yeah, that's about 80 less than you had last time. So not bad on your behalf, Matt. It's a privilege to have you both on, and thank you everyone for joining us on this edition of the Wednesday Whip Around. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new for plenty more Whip Around and other video content from the Inner Sanctum, and hit us on all our social medias and the website to see all the latest articles from these fantastic people. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.